Okay, so let's talk about kind of your central design problem. So we'll be looking at developing your pillar, your theme, and your thesis. And in terms of pillars and themes, we are going to carry this concept pretty well throughout like your entire GDD. This is something that, especially pillars, you're going to keep coming back to and reinforcing with the other mechanics that you develop, and even the way that you develop your aesthetic and your narrative and all the rest of it. So these are kind of three lenses for approaching design. So before we start creating our mechanics, which we're going to be doing in, I think, week 4, we should step back and do the pillars, the theme, and then optionally the thesis. All of these elements support each other. You can't really have one without thinking about the others. So last week we talked about genre as a way of technically and culturally categorizing games. Genre is a great tool for communicating very high-level design goals, especially outside the team, and we'll come back to it again when we make a pitch. But now we should start honing in on other categorizations and ideas that tend to be most useful for the game development team and design team internally. So pillars are a set, usually 3 to 5, elements or experiences that the game provides to a player. So these tend to be mechanical or experiential in nature, and they underpin the game's core mechanics. And they can often be described as the main gameplay loops. So sometimes I use pillars and loops a little bit interchangeably. Really, a pillar is more high level than a game loop is, but it might just like give you like a brief overview of what the loop is going to be. So why have pillars? Well, they keep your experience coherent. They keep everyone on the team working toward the same goals. They create a standard by which all mechanics or game features can be measured, and that helps define scope. So if you're not familiar with game scope, which I hope you are at this point, this is kind of the idea that a production is going to take time and budget, and we can only fit in as much game as will fit in that time and budget. And if you start adding more mechanics or more ideas, or you get an extra idea and you want to pile it on the pile, eventually things are going to go out of scope. They will no longer be producible in the time and budget that you have, which means that you either have to spend more money, well, usually you both have to spend more money and more time before the game is going to come out, and that's something that you kind of want to avoid at all costs. So pillars is one of the ways that we can do this. We can very early on sort of like clamp the scope of what we're looking at and say, all right, these like 3 things that we're defining are going to be like the core of what this game is. And any decision that we make after that has to like speak to one of these 3 goals that we have for what this game is going to be. And if it doesn't, that idea is going to go. So themes. Your theme provides the emotional context for a player. So the theme usually has connections to the aesthetic and the narrative structures of the game. So the story that you're trying to tell is going to have some kind of overarching, wrapper, and that wrapper is the theme. I hope that you've all maybe remember English classes a little bit and remember having to define themes for books that you were reading. It's kind of the same for games, right? You can read a little bit more about this on your own time. So why define a theme? This answers the question of why the player cares about what they're doing, why they want to play at all. It allows the players to form emotional connections to the work, and it helps keep the story and the characters cohesive and within scope. Again, as we just talked about, but not for mechanics now, for like the story and the narrative. So we want to make sure that we're like broadly following an arc that is going to resolve at some point. And then finally we have a thesis. So the thesis can be described as the moral of the story, the underlying worldview being presented by a game. This can be intentional or unintentional, but all games have one. And yes, this one is about politics in games. So both mechanics and narrative can work for or against the thesis. And in fact, the pillars and theme can work in opposition as well, although most of the time the game experience will work better if they're in harmony. But you might see something like this, like in the case of Breath of the Wild, for example, where the pillars of the game are about exploration and doing whatever you want, and being able to go to every part of the planet and discover things, and kind of like build your own character in your own way. But the theme and thesis are more revolved around saving the world and kind of doing it quickly, um, which is like not at all how you experience the game world, right? So most people probably never finish the game at all, and in fact never save the world. But that's, you know, still enjoyable for them. So you can make that work, but you will probably get flack about it. It works better when everything is sort of like going in the same direction. So you don't have to define a thesis for your GDD. I don't mind if you are making a game, you know, like Tetris, and you don't really feel like it has that kind of angle. That's fine. But a lot of games do. A lot of the games that I saw, even in my past classes, were about like, you know, fighting capitalism seems to be a big one. There's stuff about like the bonds of family. There was a lot of stuff about mental health. And in fact, our example for this week, Celeste, is also has a theme and a thesis that are both sort of about overcoming mental health issues. So this is something that can be really powerful for people. It really can resonate, and it's something to think about.